So where are we again?
I don't know. We talked to a couple experts in throughput accounting,
Yes, we did.
and that was enlightening. And then,
And I have since made several attempts to have discussions about throughput accounting with people that have fallen completely apart in a relatively short period of time.
that's fascinating. Would you like to say more?
Particularly because of the whole, well, that sound it's like, yeah, but cost accounting. Yeah, but that's how we do this. But the cost accounting is the thing that we do. That is the thing. And it is still here and it doesn't go away. And how are we supposed to think about throughput accounting? And then I said, well, it's really more of a prioritization tool. And they went, oh, well, that makes sense.
So, but
So,
they were concerned with we might be wasting money and we need to eliminate all that waste in the money. Is that kind of what they were?
because that's how they make money. They
Right.
make money by not losing money.
It's sort of a fixed. They're assuming that the model is fixed, and
Yeah.
if they can just remove the cost, that ultimately they'll get more. But they don't recognize this is more of a question. Sounds like a statement, but they're not necessarily saying that the way that you deal with the parts of the equation could lead you to actually create more value.
That's part of it, but there's probably another wrinkle that makes it a little more fair to talk about, and that's the fact that these people are, and this is actually friends, not clients,
Mm-hmm.
but their business is very much tied to a manufacturing technique that takes time, a lot of time, and in order to meet their they can't just in time the delivery of their product. They have to anticipate the need for it in the future based on a bunch of models. So it's not like they can say, so they're trying to figure out how they could do a throughput accounting thing on future value as opposed to immediate return or immediate value.
So their product is physical. What I hear you
Yes.
saying,
Yes.
and it takes a while. It sounds like they're relatively long cycle times. It takes a while to take the raw materials and turn them into the thing that is traded for cash. Okay.
Yes.
So maybe they're not a great. Would they be a
Yeah.
good? Yeah. If it sounds like more of a. Trying to think of if throughput accounting would be as useful there as in other places where they might want to dynamically. It seems like they were sort of on rails, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, they are, but the thing is that they don't want to build an inventory of excess product because it expires. So
Oh,
they can't even, it's not like, you've got a backlot full of cars that you'll eventually sell one way or another. It's if we mispredict the market, we are either not satisfying the customer need or we are over satisfying the customer need to our own detriment.
so that's a potential. So inventory is bad, but
Yes.
waste is worse. I mean, stuff that just if it's perishable, I don't want to press into exactly what it is, but
Yeah.
yeah, if you can make it and it takes a while to sell it, that's bad. But if you make it and it never gets sold, that seems worse.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they employ a lot of very linear planning and market research and many factors that they have scientifically developed over many years to try and gauge what they're going to need to have in the market at a given time. So,
Makes sense. So
yeah,
it's not that throughput accounting couldn't help, but it may not be the dominant technique or the biggest input to those
yeah,
decisions. Is that what I hear you
I,
saying?
I think so. I mean,
Hmm.
I don't know how we could apply it in that instance. And I don't, so by all means, I am no expert on throughput accounting, even after two rousing conversations with
Yeah.
experts.
Well,
Um,
and neither am I, but that's kind of what we're doing. We're getting the experts in and we're becoming experts. We're asking the right questions at least.
I hope so.
Yeah.
So anyhow, um, so what's new in the world for you?
What's new in the world?
Yeah,
Um,
what's new in your world?
what's new in my world? Getting over a physical illness. I was really impressed with the flow at scale presentation. Honestly, I've been giving that a
Were
lot of
you?
thought. I was, yes.
That's interesting. What? I watched the flow at scale presentation.
I
I was
saw that
there.
you were on the
Jeff,
list.
yeah. Did you
Sure.
see I commented and I asked some questions?
I did. I thought, I can't remember what the question was, but I thought that was a
Yeah.
great question. I was anticipating he would answer it. He didn't answer it. He skipped over it for some reason, right?
Yeah, that's because his minions were answering it. So what Jeff was, and what we figured out is he had advocates in the audience,
Yeah.
and the advocates were heading off questions, or they were deflecting or let's say answering,
Yeah.
but they weren't always necessarily answering in the. It was just, you could tell because there was at least one or two people who kept applauding through the whole thing. It's just like, oh my god, that's so great. Oh, that's a wonderful point. It's like,
Team Tame Flow was
yeah.
out in force.
So that's fine. That's great. So the thing that I felt a little bit watching the present, like the ideas of Tameflow are good. The idea of him creating a scaling framework for it that isn't a framework, that is not anything like that. And fine, that's marketing.
Mm-hmm.
The 16 points that he gave, those were great.
Mm-hmm.
But the model he kept using was about the simplest organizational structure you could imagine. It was a vertical pyramid. He basically built a vertical pyramid, and and the supposition is that your leader path is a single point of entry. It's like this one leader, and everything below it funnels up to that one leader.
Yes.
Which is not the model we encounter very often.
Well, so fair enough. And I'm a little bit. I'm not as interested. I think I can understand why he would spend so much time talking about safe, because safe is dominant, and if you're trying to bring a new thing, you have to sort of talk about the competitor. I'm not super interested in, you might think of it as safe bashing, and maybe safe deserves to be bashed, but whatever. um, I'm not as drawn into the talk about what safe is or isn't. But I thought he was specifically saying, in that this was in the context of, if you're going to use scaled agile framework, the thing is you're supposed to transform the whole organization. Like, you need to, it's not as targeted, and that was one of his key this is what I heard him say. The key differentiator is you don't have time, and you don't need time to spread it out over everything. You need to just have a vertical slice of the org going up to somebody who has budgetary authority, who can make decisions.
Right. But as we keep seeing, that vertical slice of the org from say a product perspective may look like a single path, but the players on the field are not part of that as a reporting path. They have different pathways that
Right.
they are being contended with. And so your constraints in the system, because it's all about, having your system laid out and using theory of constraints, and let's find the bottlenecks, and let's focus all our attention on the one organizational constraint. And his thing was, there was one organizational constraint, and that's the one you got to focus on. And yes, theory of constraint says that, but I think the reality is there's going to be more. Like the
more than one constraint at a time.
Yeah. I mean, from a system-wide perspective, yes, you've got a system constraint you got to take care of. But within each of those teams, let's just take a team. Within those teams, there's going to be constraints as well. And a lot of times, and that's why the question I asked had to do with, does this model presuppose that you have a well-understood system or a well-formed system? He kept saying a well-engineered organizational structure, that such that you were reducing dependency.
That's what it was, right?
Yeah.
So I think you asked, are you assuming that the dependency management has been solved?
Yeah.
Right.
And the answer that his lieutenant gave was, well, not necessarily. It's like, well, okay. So it depends. So
Yeah,
that's fine. It's fine as it went. I guess it was a little light on actual content. I did stay all the way to the end.
It is funny. He went through a ton of stuff, and he did give us a fair amount of detail, But you're right. The question that I had was, okay, so how do you operationalize this? Exactly what tools and
Yeah.
instruments do you use? And I don't know if that's going to be documented, if there's going to be a flow at scale book, because I would really love to see the guts of this thing and like the inner world. How is this sausage being made exactly?
Yeah.
Because what
Well,
he's
and how do
describing,
you,
the story he told was compelling, but what does it look
yeah.
like exactly when you do it?
Yeah. And right now the cost of entry to find that out, it's in the 100,000 euro area.
Well, but I mean, if you look at the alternative, it's actually cheaper than it could have been. Putting on my Ron Popeil hat here now.
Yeah,
How
sure.
much would
But
you
at
pay for
now,
this?
this
How
low,
about
low
it?
price. What if I knocked it down 50%? And then,
Yeah.
the minions all go, yay. Anyway, so it was a sales pitch. It was not aimed at coaches. And he took a little while to remind people that he was not going to be satisfying coaches. It was almost like, oh,
And
okay.
totally fair. I mean, maybe
Yeah.
coaches have been engaged in some stuff that doesn't have as impressive an ROI,
Well,
right? Maybe that
sure.
explains some of the market conditions in the quote unquote agile world.
Yeah,
You know, and what he's describing in terms of organizational performance, I mean, it ain't bragging if you can do it, right?
true.
So
That's
we'll
true.
see.
And he's got street cred. He's been doing the tame flow stuff. He wrote a book.
10 years
People,
ago, he wrote that
yeah,
book.
yeah.
The book of Tameflow, I think, is 2014 copyright.
So, I mean, it seems like it can work. It seems like it's just a question of, I think the statement that it would be a hell of a lot easier to do if you did go through the organizational reengineering first, just because you would have fewer moving parts to contend with. But
Maybe.
that's
So I can see
that's
that. But
yeah.
but on the other hand, isn't part of his pitch, and I'm just thinking out loud, I'm not
Mhm.
advocating or not, but part of his pitch is that the way I heard it is like the organizational reengineering to match the agile structure and systems and dynamics is part of the great big backlog you've got with the safe road. But the theory of constraint says, "Hmm, just focus on whatever the system constraint is, and maybe you can clean up those reporting, like you deal with it later if you have to." I see him cutting, you know what I see him using that principle number 8, simplicity, like
Oh,
maximizing a lot of work that doesn't have to be done to get to the organization in terms of the increased throughput.
yeah. Okay, fair. I'll give him this much. It's not an agile framework. He's not
This
if
must be
you're
what he
looking
meant by
at
that. Yeah.
if you're looking through the lens of, well, how does this make you agile? It doesn't.
A
It
better
makes
performing
your
organization,
organization flow better, right?
which is
And
maybe
that,
better than agile. What's the point of
well,
agile?
and maybe it is.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
I mean, agile, we can't really claim that agile is infallible or 100% effective any more than waterfall could claim effectiveness. And
And a lot of us fell in love with that tool and I don't want to speak for anybody else,
go ahead.
but there have been some
Go on.
observable patterns where
Yeah.
launching teams and adherence to I've seen this. I know you've seen it. Adherence to the method was deemed as the outcome or the goal, and it was like,
Yeah.
yeah, we did that, but we didn't increase your sales or your the amount of money you had or decrease your risk or any of that stuff.
Yeah.
So
And so,
I can see why he's taking that anyway.
yeah. And so he's probably seen it too, where people would kind of go, well, but that's not agile, or we're not doing. And he's just like, stop thinking about that. Just think about the flow of value.
Is your client selling agile?
Yeah.
Right? If not, maybe we don't care about the level of agile.
But maybe all the high priced consultants are.
High price consultants might need to find something that works better. That's what I'm.
Yeah. Maybe I'm just looking at the daunting task of restructuring and whole organizational culture the way that we wish they would, but to have it be as almost an operational prerequisite, where you go, I mean, you don't have to, but to take a matrixed cross reporting team organizational structure and find the constraint in that mess.
Yeah.
It's because it's like you can't swing a dead cat without finding a constraint. It's like you've got individual team members on 5 teams. You've got teams that are answering to more than one product roadmap. You've got, it's like the
Yeah.
organization is not well structured from a dependency removal standpoint. So your dependencies are going to be all over the place. And I don't know how you could say, well, today we're going to zero in here, like here's a stack of needles. We're going to zero in on this needle today.
Yeah.
And
Well,
it's
I
so
mean,
anyway,
this is
maybe
what gives me hope for all the high press consultants in the world. I'm pulling for you guys. This is really, in some cases you probably don't have to worry about it. Some cases you probably do, organizing around value and thinking the value streams is a tool that you'll need, right?
yeah.
No one else always necessarily deploy that model. But and maybe what you can do is after you demonstrate that especially the financial throughput goes up through applying the theory of constraints, then it gives you some breathing room to organize in ways that are more sane for people in terms of reporting structures and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
But he clearly is teasing, like the example he gave at Bosch, 70,000 requests a month across 120 teams, I think. And any request could involve any
Yeah.
set of teams in any order at any time. And the method rationalizes and deals with all, like they were able to service 70. The narrative that he's putting out there is astonishing. It's super impressive.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the only way that I can understand how you would do that is you would, through all of those teams, he found the one team that was the system constraint. And that was the only backlog that they worried about. The rest of the teams could manage their own backlogs, but really what he got was unity of purpose on this
Yeah.
stuff has to go in this order as quickly as possible. And that freed up the rest of the system. So how to do that is like the
Yeah.
$64,000 question.
That it kind of is. It's
Yeah.
like, and maybe the answer is more common. I mean, that was an infrastructure team or something like that, I believe, or an
They
architecture
were,
team.
yeah. Well, they were
Or was it
it was a
platform?
it was a shared service. I think they were
Yeah.
writing software that then went into all these modules for all these car makers. With this stuff, they were creating these modules that would get reused in all these other places.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, yeah, you could zero in and say that is your big constraint for the overall throughput of the system. And I guess maybe fractally speaking, that was the big system constraint.
Yeah. That's what I heard him saying.
And does that change? So as you drill down into the fractal and you get into smaller and smaller areas of focus, as a system constraint, yes, that was the team, but within each and every team, there are also constraints, or which each and every sub assembly, there is going to be constraints.
Yeah.
And maybe for illustration purposes, he oversimplified and just said, look, we did it. We looked at 120 teams and found the one, and then went, okay.
But they still had to go through all those other constraints and work them out, is what you're thinking?
I think that would you really, the way that he describes it makes it sound like we've got this big initiative and the organization just operates business as usual, but we're making detect and repair decisions from on high for whatever we think is the biggest problem at a time. And so from the outside perspective, there's very little activity or very little anything happening.
From the management point of view. So yeah, this is the idea of management by exception, right?
Okay.
As opposed to management. So in safe or other stuff, there's the assumption that managers have to be super involved all the time in actively managing stuff because otherwise the flow will get stuck. And he's saying, actually, if you set up the system right, it kind of runs. It's like a self-leveling thing, and
Yeah.
you only if there's a red light blinking that you've set up does a manager need to get involved.
Right. Again, a well-engineered system.
System.
And so I think the magic is in the engineering of the system, to
100%.
where we go into a client and we look at their system and say, this is very complicated.
Right.
Like, and they said, yes. And that's why we have this dysfunction and that dysfunction and this thing that we just don't look at, and we don't talk about those, and we've had to put these structures into place, and we elevate people with the wrong mindset or the wrong mental models because that's what it takes to maintain control over this Gordian knot of an organizational structure that we've created.
We have a very complicated problem, gentlemen. Could you please help us create a complicated solution that is up to the task?
Yes. And
Yeah.
if you can't do it, I'm sure there's a high paid consultancy that will come in and build one for us.
They will build you a complicated solution, no doubt. But yeah, this is why I find Steve Tennant so interesting. He's saying, actually, I have a simple solution for your complicated problem. And that's actually way more powerful because I'm operating at a different level of leverage.
Yeah. Well, I wish him luck in, finding those folks who are going to, bite the bullet and say, yeah, okay, we'll trust you. And maybe when you look at the cost potential for a safe rollout in an organization versus what he's offering, and you say, well, maybe that's a gamble we're willing to take. Like, it's still a lot of money, but it's not as much money. And so if it doesn't work, yeah, we throw that money away, but hopefully we'll learn something along the way. It won't be a total loss. And we can always go and pay the big money for the big thing.
Totally. Especially when you look at the scale of spending in this space over the last 10. I mean, you know the story about the bank in Europe that spent $1 billion in $1 billion in 2018. They spent $1 billion, of course, over the course
With
of
a
the year.
B.
B is in boy billion, $1,000 million they spent and got apparently no change. So Steve comes along and says, "How about 200 grand?" It's like, wow, where were you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
They're legit problems. I mean, these companies have to find a, and so if he can do 50% of it, it would be a better value proposition, I would say.
Yeah. What was that? 200? That would be
some small percentage. I'm not doing math in public.
Maybe 200,000. No, or 2,000 hundreds. Like I don't know what the best way to say that is.
He's describing
when you went, it's a
1,000 million.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's $1 billion. Yeah. So he's describing an order of magnitude, at least, cost reduction to do this stuff. It's got to have an effect on the market. If it works at all, gotta be impactful. My prediction is in 5 or 10 years, this will be a lot of how this is understood to be done. Like these things, I don't see how, if it works, you can know that this exists as a business owner and not go down that road, or at least investigate it.
Yeah. Yeah. So I was intrigued. Like you, I think I'd like to see the book. I'd like to just be able to spend a little more time with the notion.
I wonder if he's going. So if Steve was smart, so this is super arrogant.
Careful.
Yeah, Steve is smart, but let me just. Okay, 20 minutes. Let me bring another couple things in here. Do you know that Kent Beck has he's created an LLM and he's loaded all of his stuff into it. I believe he refers to it as Rent-A-Kent.
Okay.
So you can ask the virtual LLM that has been trained on all of Kent Beck's information.
Okay.
You can rent a Kent. You can put a quarter in it and ask him a question, and it'll go through all of his stuff. Apparently, is an LLM. I don't know if this is a service he's been making available. Also, Mike Cohn from Mountain Goat Software out in Colorado.
I'm familiar.
Yeah, I don't know if he released it, but he announced the existence of a thing he's calling the Goatbot, I believe. Goatbot. Sure, I don't know if you have to translate it into You might need to translate it into the like animal noises, but you can ask it questions, and it's trained on everything Mike Cohn has ever said or published or written.
Sure. Okay, so this goes back to our earlier questions about AI, where you make sure
Yes,
you're feeding it the information you want it to draw from,
totally.
not all not all possible information.
Absolutely. The training data
Right.
makes a very, which is by the way, we could talk to about Google Gemini if that's interesting. Probably not. But Steve could do this because he's got the book of Tame Flow. He's got Standing on Bits. He's got that book he wrote with Wolfram Muller. He's got a bunch of other stuff prior to that.
Yeah.
He could put all this stuff into an LLM and be like, hey,
So are these LLMs like, so to make that practical, is it a service you subscribe to?
no, I believe it's a private model. I don't know actually, I'm super curious if any listeners,
Like, what are
either
they
one of
going to
our
do? Are they
listeners,
going to monetize? They're going to monetize their body of knowledge,
I don't
basically.
think they know. I would doubt that they know. I think
Okay.
that they're playing with it just as an experiment like everybody else is. But this is the question, like, wouldn't that be super useful to be able to talk to the Flow at Scale LLM and be like, hey, can you generate an operational throughput map for these specific um, conditions and assumptions and blah blah blah,
Mm-hmm.
right? And like, so
I don't know.
yeah,
Is OpenAI, will it do call, like, you can ask it a question and it will give you a response. Will it ever ask you a clarifying question? Because
I don't
that,
know.
and
I don't.
that's I mean, it's still one way at that point. It's like, well, if you got garbage back, you didn't ask the right question, or you didn't frame the conditions right. So I don't know. I'm still skeptical about this. Did you see
Hmm.
OpenAI is getting sued for not being a benefit to humanity?
No, who's brought that suit
I just saw it go by on the news feed.
on the
Like,
Onions news feed?
no, it wasn't.
The Babylon Bee came up
I
with the
don't
story.
know who it was, but there's a lawsuit pending, or it
Well, the
has
New York
been.
Times sued them because they're like, you trained on our stuff, and that's an economic benefit that we should be remunerated for.
See?
So that's being litigated. Yeah.
Yeah, but this is no, this was specifically around the concept of being a benefit to humanity or not. It's like, you are not benefiting. You
I
said
mean,
your corporate mission was to benefit, and it is, you have failed to achieve that.
well, is fire a benefit to humanity? In some cases, absolutely. In other cases, it's a risk. I think it's got to be the same kind of thing, right?
I don't know if I could say right to that.
So
That's a whataboutism to me.
you use,
But what about fire? How could AI not be good if fire is not be good? That's,
it's interesting.
yeah,
It applies to knives too, though. It
sure.
applies to everything, every tool, hammers. I mean, a hammer built your house. It
I
also
don't
bludgeoned that guy to
think
death.
the guy that recognized that fire is something that people could use to their benefit said, this
He
is
didn't
going
burn
to
the
make,
cave down.
I'm going to improve humanity's lot in life with this notion that
Oh,
when the lightning comes and starts that tree on fire, we can run out there with sticks and go, ha ha, I have found fire.
so you're
But
saying OpenAI should have been a bit less. Uh,
ambitious? I
yeah,
don't know.
that's the word I was thinking of, but I don't know if it's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that. I'm just saying this is a lawsuit I heard about. I'm not advocating the lawsuit. I'm just amused by it. So
I think there's enormous potential for companies and people, and it's just a year away or 6 months, or I don't know. I'm super curious about, but just put these books, this video, this, stick it in here. Here's your training data, relatively small set.
yeah.
And then you can, it's like you're talking a more boring version of Kent Beck, one with no
Are you
personality.
implying that Kent Beck is a boring person?
No, I'm saying I'm implying the opposite. Like if you
I
actually had coffee with Kent Beck, it would be entertaining. You'd get the same answers, not the same, but the virtualized version of him, or the statistically optimized predictive
okay.
string of text that comes back from the LLM trained on him would be less of us. Oh God, I hope it has less of a sense of humor. If the LLMs are funnier than us, we're totally.
That's true. That's
Right? What benefit do we bring at that point?
the LLM starts like quoting Dumb and Dumber. Oh,
Ye-
remember that quote? And
oh God. And it nailed
like
the punchline and the timing. I need to find a different job. It's a possibility.
comedians everywhere are quaking in their boots.
Yeah, I still say there's no soul there, so they won't really be able to have that spark, but we'll find out. Maybe the
Oh,
spark is just another thing that could be statistically modeled. God, I
I
hope not.
somebody put a thing on LinkedIn the other day, and it was a kind of a cute cartoony picture of a horse wearing a unicorn costume,
Mm.
and and the words above it was something like transfer. It was supposed to say transformation, something, but the same way that the generated art tends to clone multiple fingers, like,
Yes.
you know, it cloned multiple letters in the word, like it got the word wrong. It was like,
Yeah,
but it was, yeah,
it's fascinating. There's a commercial that was generated for baseball like 6 months ago. It's just fascinating. It's like a dream. It's mostly right, but there are certain aspects of it that feel like a waking nightmare or like a dreamlike quality, surrealistic dreamlike
yeah,
quality. It's fascinating.
yeah. So, and you know, all the people who view themselves as being artists are just looking at that and going, I mean, they're viewing that way more uh as a threat to their livelihood than even, you know, folks in our realm have been viewing that.
It's hard to see how you're gonna like master it and use it, like get the leverage out of it. So because it's like somebody said this recently, AI isn't gonna beat out humans. Humans using AI are gonna beat out humans that are not using AI. And that struck me as a interesting perspective.
If by beat out you mean get a find an answer or find a reference faster, okay, I guess you could accumulate small wins like that.
Well, it lets you. I mean, let's use a physical analogy. Like, let's say you're digging a ditch, right? If you dig by hand, you can just do a lot more with this team. Or if you need to survey an area, you can walk it, or you can get on a bicycle, and it's like you're doing the same thing, but you're doing greater volumes or greater scope. Like you can see how it would be useful to like search through all the Steve Tendon stuff and tell me how would he create this thing, right? Like you could do it really quickly. You'd be doing the same thing as if you spent a couple of years researching it, right? But you would do it in a matter of a minute. So it's like you're
Is there
doing, yeah,
is there something to be said for the fact that it can't create, it can only glue together things that already exist,
yeah,
whether it's an idea, whether it's components of a picture, whether it's right, you have to give it a a template for what a document looks like, and then it can plug things into the holes in the document. You got, but it can't create, like you can't say give me an ideal thing that has never existed before,
yes. You have to
right?
give it a purpose. You have to give it because it's not going to be creative. It's not going to come
Right.
up with a new thing. It's not going to have taste. It'll give you
Okay.
a bunch of options, and but it's up to the human to be like, I can see how you got there, but no, we're,
Right.
we're not
Right.
doing
The
that.
robot isn't going to innovate. The robot is going to do more of the way we do things around here.
Totally faster,
Right.
yes, but
And it will come to those same responses faster. So, so I would argue OpenAI then, or not OpenAI, sorry, not
mm,
specifically,
yeah.
but these things are, they could theoretically stifle creativity, innovation, and evolution because you become dependent on the thing that gives you the same answers back.
Hmm. Like the
And
Wall-E kind of problem. We're all just
yeah,
fat things in a chair that forgot how to feed
maybe,
ourselves.
right? Or we forgot how to come up with creative ideas. It's like someone still has to take, give me the relevant pieces of information that I can put together, and then I will intuit a thing that binds those together in a new way. That
Ma-
that is that's where the innovative spark still can happen. Um, if the robot learns to do that, then it will do that way faster, and the path it goes down maybe not.
Yeah.
That's the scary part. That's the unknown.
So maybe that's why humans are always going to be in the loop there, because the creative spark, the editorial judgment, the taste, the really the final judgment about what's actually useful for other humans, you're always going to need a human to do that.
Said every mad scientist ever.
This
I
is the
watched
Franken.
Oppenheimer over the weekend, so I'm just
Interesting. Well, I mean, it's worth. This is probably not something I should say. This is not politics, but I will observe that we haven't had any world wars since that thing he invented came into the. I don't know if that's a good argument or not. Probably something we shouldn't go into.
I'm gonna defer on that.
Yeah, this is outside the scope of this agile thing or any other one, probably.
All right, so welcome back.
Yes.
As we trim that out.
And I don't know if the AI safety thing is something we need to get in. Like, I still don't understand. I'll just say this and I'll shut up. I don't understand where the AI is going to come up with its own goals. I don't understand what the philosophical term for this is tautological, meaning goal directed. Like, where are they going to get their own goals from?
Well,
I can see how they get smarter, but like they wouldn't get more desires. Where does the desire emerge from the intelligence? I still don't understand that.
See, it kind of depends on the model that it's operating under. Like if you were to take let's take Kent Beck's AI. Let's take Mike Cohn's AI. And we have these two things that have been taught to think of the world as Kent would think of it, or the way that Mike would think of it.
It's not thinking. It's not thinking, right?
Well, it's okay. So it's going to collect information. It's going to give you back patterns based on your questions, based on what it's been taught.
Statistical probabilistic predictions. Yes, go ahead. Sorry.
So if those two systems were to learn from each, if they were connected, and now you ask questions of the Kent Beck model, and it just to check, it would run through the Mike Cohn model too, and then give you
talk to each other.
A little of both, right? So they would learn from each other. Now they're building a collective base. And we introduce it to something. We say, hey, Steve Tendon is his flow at scale ideas and tame flow and his works. Put that all together. Now, sooner or later, you are going to give the model conflicting solutions. If you keep playing that out, there's going to be two solutions for the same problem that go down different paths.
Could you think of it as two different perspectives on the same problem, two different approaches?
Yes, two different approaches.
Yeah.
Okay. So we talk about, we give the AI a pattern to follow. Hey, give me a well-designed PowerPoint that explains this concept. Mm-hmm. And somebody had to show it what a well-designed PowerPoint was.
Totally.
Which is an opinion.
Yes.
Right? All right.
Totally.
And then it mimics that. So if you're going down this path and then somebody goes and introduces yet another large learning model into this collective that has a very different way of solving problems or proposing solutions that might be at odds with, one could say, the altruistic nature that tends to go with the agile mindset. But I mean, I this is just going way over the top, but what if you were to give it an authoritarian mindset model that said, by the way, all solutions can come through violence? And so
this is a Star Wars bar I would love to hang out in, by the way, where the LLMs are having drinks.
But I mean, if they start connecting together and learning from each other, they will learn different ways of interpreting responses. That ultimately, and we touched on this, the scary part is that you've got one that someone put together that's basically Hannibal Lecter's mindset. Like, ask Hannibal Lecter a question and see how Hannibal Lecter would answer that. And then that one gets introduced into the Mike Cohn, Steve Tendon, right? It would.
Yeah.
Right.
So maybe there's
So
two different types of learning here. There's learning on basically facts, but maybe we have to have there's like a configuration for values here, right? To say
yeah.
here's the layer of, here are the facts, like here are the literally the string of words in the order that we
Hmm.
want you to model statistically in whatever black box way you've got, and they must be doing this at some level. But then you pass it through. Here are the kind of things that are worth pursuing, or here's the way to think
E.
about it. Here are the things that are you should work, trying to think of the philosophical definition of a value. Here are the things that you should act in order to gain and or keep. Here are the
So
happiness or
teaching it what you think morality is.
effectively.
Okay.
Yeah, I say, so there's two ways to cross this river. One is you hire a guy, and the second one is that you shoot him and steal his boat. And
Hmm.
like the second one, don't go down those paths. Those are logical possibilities,
Okay.
right? But they're prohibited. They're outside the scope. And I'm not proposing a way to do this. I have no idea how
Yeah.
difficult it would be, but it feels like, Isaac
So having
Asimov
the
had.
AI recognize, far be it from me to ever suggest that you would kill someone.
Well, the AI would know the
But
same
one
way
of
you're.
your options is
The AI would at some point, as they get smarter, they would recognize that as a logical option. But just like your 7-year-old knows, oh, that's a possibility, but we don't do that,
okay. So then
right?
we get our open AI and we give it the trolley car problem.
Well, the
So
trolley car problem is actually an insoluble thing, right? So this is where the humans are
no,
always going to be.
right. But we still ask the AI and we become dependent on the AI. AI,
Well,
logically
there's
speaking, the trolley is going down the thing. You got an old man on the track alone who's lived a full life. And you've got a group of school children on what shall we do? And he
well,
goes through and checks the Kent Beck subroutine, and there's no answer there. And then goes to Steve Tennant, and Steve Tennant says, "Well, what's the tame flow response to this? Like, what's the the theory of constraints and the value of the return of value?"
yeah,
And it comes back and does a calculation based on that, and
yeah.
still doesn't quite have an answer. So it runs the Hannibal Lecter subroutine and says, "Oh, got it."
So okay, so how about you have, and Isaac Asimov, like in the 50s, said that the first
Yes.
rule of robots was you don't do any. Maybe there's a rule that says if any of my recommendations are ever going to be potentially causative of a loss of human life, stop. Don't say anything. Start blinking the red light and say, "Ooh, I don't have any options here that don't lead to bad outcomes as you've defined them."
Yeah.
And the
So the
human would
three
have to.
laws,
Then this is why the human is always like, you can't just have a
and we
robot running
mentioned
the.
this. I think we mentioned this when we did the first AI one, and we talked about the laws of robotics.
Yeah,
And Asimov's three laws actually became four laws later. But the first law was I can't that I can't execute any action or take any inaction that could cause a human being to come to harm.
there you go.
And then it would go, and then it went down. The final one was, and I can't do anything that would hurt myself unless it violates
The
one of
first
the
three.
higher laws. And then they came in with a higher order law that was revealed 4 books later, the zeroth law, because programmers.
Sure.
And the zeroth law was you can't take any action that would harm humanity or through inaction cause humanity to come to harm. And what that ended up, and that superseded the individual human one, and that was the
Humanity.
loophole. It
That
allowed the robot to make decisions on a, in this case, galactic scale about wins and losses, and this is the better path for humanity.
So a couple of
Yeah,
thoughts there. Apparently, he should have started numbering at 2, just in case for
too
this
late.
future expansion.
You
Number
can't.
one.
I mean, he already had dozens of books.
That's
You
my number
can't.
one.
You can't go change.
Number 2, the zero. So harmful to humanity feels like a really difficult thing to define.
Well,
Could you say, well, look, it's going to be. You can't tell people the wrong thing. Like if you let them look at misinformation, that could be super harmful. We should
but
shut that down.
your see, this
That's a
is
bad
philosophy.
analogy.
Philosophers have this conversation all the time. What is objective morality? What is the objective truth? What is what is right and wrong?
Mm-hmm.
And there are gray areas in which sometimes choices are between one thing that's more wrong or considered worse than the other.
Right.
And that's
Right.
Anyway, so you're always big on saying the AI doesn't have a soul and therefore it can't do this. Like, and the thought I always have on that is it's not the soul that's going to be its downfall, because it's going to be the raw choice information it calculates and says this option is preferable to that option. And it can
wouldn't
give
let
you
it
a
do
list
that.
of calculations that it followed to say this negative choice is less negative than that negative choice.
Maybe that's just maybe that's a decision. It's an area that we don't let it make those decisions.
How do you stop it?
Well, you program it, like we create the thing.
No, but the thing is, at some point, the AI model learns
Values?
It decides the pathways it's going to store the information in and access the information in.
Well, yeah, but I feel like
you
you're
can't
conflating.
possibly monitor all of that.
Well, it feels like there's a way to say, and like what's harmful to humanity feels like a good example of that. So broad, it can't be really adjudicated without reference to values, and maybe that's the line. Like when you start talking about values, what's good and what's bad, what's moral and what's not moral for humans, maybe the robot can't make that choice automatically. Maybe there needs to be a change control board where it runs past a human.
But remember, the robot it's not making creative choices. We've already determined that. All it's doing is taking choices that have already been made, calculations has been taught, and it's applying it's applying reasoning to that. Not reasoning, but it's saying based on pattern matching, goes through the Turing engine, pops out the cost of delay of this choice versus the cost of delay of that choice, based on all the deep learning I've done from Dean Leffingwell, says that this is the one that should go next, right?
So by analogy, let's say like your steam engine can enable you to make a big hole real quick, but it can't tell you if you should.
Right.
That's the operator's job.
But here's the benefit of that solution.
Yes, but it's your choice. Yeah.
Hey, I don't want to be accused of fear mongering AI.
I'm just glad that we were able to solve it in this limited amount of time. I feel really good about that. If you have any other questions for us, please send them our way, I guess. Right.
Yes. And if you are a large learning model,
what are you calling me, fat?
and would like to
we're all LLMs. Some of us are larger than others. Yes.
Oh, hey, everybody. If you like what you saw here, like and subscribe. We never say that.
No. Well, because, yeah, you should do that for sure.
You should do that. Otherwise, how are we going to know you're out there?
We need
Let
to get
us
to 7
know
listeners.
you're there.
That's our metric. 12 listeners by June.
So.
All right. Well, I think, we feel like we should.
That was when I was looking for the sticky note before.
Oh, it's backwards. I can't read it.
No. Okay. Here.
Okay. So now I'm looking at your. Yeah. So the robot camera again. You have to be careful.
Don't trust the robot. It wants your face.
The choices that they make, they're not reliable. Anyway, that has been an Agile thing. I've been Matt Beam.
I am Mike Markey.
And we will be back next week, hopefully with a Jeff Singleton as well.
Hopefully.
All right.
Thanks, everybody. Yeah. We'll be back. Someone will be back sooner or later.
You have it.
Bye.
You have our word.
Coach who can't find a sticky note.
Scandalous.
It just isn't done. One must have at all times a stack of sticky notes so one can write down a note to oneself.
So no Jeff Singleton this morning's.
Guess not. He has the crud.
Create, read, update, delete.
Well, I think it's just making him feel cruddy.
A biological illness. I see.
So he says.
Yeah.
Do you have reason to doubt him?
Well, no. I had it last week, actually. So it makes, and even though we didn't have contact, I guess I'm not shocked. It's going around.
Yeah, I like how you're like, well, I'm not sure how I gave it to you, but
Mm-hmm.
like, I'm pretty sure
in a
there were other
hand-waving
ways. Yes. Maybe you told two friends and they told two friends.
The Breck commercial? That is a deep cut.
It could be, or it's Kevin Bacon. It's 6 degrees. All you managed to do is you, since everyone is connected within 6 degrees to Kevin Bacon.
Has anybody talked about 6 degrees of Breck hair care products?
I don't think so.
Yeah.
Maybe that's a topic for another day.
Yeah, not this one.
Not this one. Hey everybody.
Welcome to Here's This hair care thing.
We are not members or users of
Nope.
hair care.
But we are finding better ways to deal with our hair by doing it and helping other people.
I can add, a hat to the whole thing.
That's fantastic.
Isn't it?
I'm 100% bald. People know that from the show, so I don't even mess around with that.